Advanced Financial Accounting Excel Practice Problem. In this presentation, we will work a practice problem in Excel related to segment reporting. Get ready to account with Advanced Financial Accounting. Here we are in Excel. We have our information on the left-hand side. We're going to put that into the blue area in our worksheet on the right side. So we're going to be dealing with segment reporting. The information we have in order to put together our worksheets will be, and notice what we have in terms of the worksheets. We're going to have the segmental disclosure worksheet, and then the reportable segments. We'll do some calculations on which segments would be reportable using our 10% tests. So then we're going to say segment reporting, consolidated corporate data for the year includes sales, consolidated income for taxes, total assets. Then we have data reported for operating divisions. The divisions are simply going to be named for our practice problem A, B, C, and D divisions. We have the sales to outsiders as well as inter-segment sales. And then we have the traceable costs and assets. We have some added information including inter-segment sales are priced at cost. So the inter-segment sales that are going to inter-segment, so segment sale from one to the other, is going to be priced at cost. So all goods have subsequently been sold to non-affiliates. So after the sale, inter-segment sales been sold to non-affiliates, third party after that sale. Some joint production costs are allocated to the division based on total sales. The joint costs were $57,000 allocated. Corporate center, so that now we're thinking we've got these segments, A, B, C, and D. Then you got the corporate center, which isn't a separate segment. And that's going to be the general expenses for the corporate center, $34,000. Assets that the chief operating division decision maker did not use in making the decision regarding operating segments, and that's going to be for the $134,000. Now we'll take a look at our segmental disclosure worksheet, which will help us out with some of the information we may need to disclose related to the segments. So we're going to start off with the revenue. So I'm going to be starting off with the revenue. We have the segments up top, A, B, C, D. We've got the corporate admin, combined, inter-segment elimination entries if there are any eliminations, and then the consolidated total here. So we're starting off with the revenue. We're going to have the sales to unaffiliated customers, so outside sales. And this is, I'm just going to pull this from the data. This is going to be pulled from the data of the 361. I'm going to copy that across, which is just simply going to be pulling over the data for B, C, and D as well. So I'm going to copy that. I'm holding down Shift and highlighting or selecting these three cells, and then Control V. So there's our information, just putting these numbers on over there. Then we have the inter-segment sales. So I'm going to be picking up the inter-segment sales, which are going to be equal to the 80,000. Once again, I'm just going to simply use Excel, copying and pasting the formulas, Control C. I'm holding down Shift and then going over to the three cells, let go of Shift, Control V, pasting those items, just pulling those numbers over once again. That's going to give us the total revenue. So then we're going to say, all right, that's the total revenue. Summing this up using the sum function equals the sum of up arrow, holding down Shift, up arrow, and enter. Then I'm going to copy and paste that formula across, summing up these cells. Control C, right arrow, Shift, and then right arrows, and then Control V. So I'm just pasting that same formula, of course. So there we have that information. So then I'm going to take the allocation percents, because this could help us with some of the allocations. So I'm going to be taking the amounts divided by the total. So then we have, let me total it up here. So the combination is going to be out here in the outer column. So we could sum this up. We're not going to have any corporate admin for the revenue. The corporate admin doesn't generate revenue, right? That's a cost center. So we're going to be summing this up then. We'll sum this up. And once again, I can copy that. It cell's a little small for some reason. We can copy that, Control C. I'm going to paste it on down. I can paste it on down to both. If we wanted to here, this one here, we could sum up either this way, which adds up to the 1,144,000, or we can sum it up this way, also adding up to the 1,144,000. Now this one is going to be eliminated. It's going to be part of our inter-segment eliminations. So I'm going to say negative of this number. And then within the consolidated numbers, it's just going to be equal to the sum of this number and this number, the combined items and any kind of adjustments that we make to them. So then if I copy that down, Control C, Control V, and then we can sum this up either way. I can Control V it here as well, sum it up this way, or we could sum this way. After I add one more number here, equals the sum of these items, same item there. Okay, so now we can sum it up this way, 1,017,000 and then the 1,017,000. Okay, so now that we have our total, we're looking at this total. We're going to be using our percentages, and we're just going to say, you know, each one of these divided by the total. Each one of these divided by the total. That'll give us our allocation percents, allocation percent that is now spelled correctly. So now we're going to say this equals the 144,000 divided by the total. Now I'm going to want to copy this across. I want to keep this number the same, so I'm going to say F4 in Excel, which puts a $ before the M and the 6, which makes it an absolute reference, meaning that cell's not going to change when I copy it across. However, this cell, H6, will. So I'm going to say, all right, let's copy that then. I'm holding down Shift, right, and then Control V. And then let's double check this. All we did was take the next cell, see how this one moved over, divided by the total. So it took the next one and divided by the total. So there we have the percentages. Then let's consider our operating costs. So we're going to consider now our operating costs, including the traceable costs. So let's pick up the traceable costs, which is going to be equal to our table here, the 259,000. And maybe I should make that negative to make it a cost. I could make it a negative, like a negative of that. And then I'll widen this cell a bit. I'll widen all of them a bit so we can see it. All right, and then I'm going to copy that across. I'm just going to say Control C, holding down Shift, highlighting 3 cells or selecting them, Control V. There we have it. You'll note all we're doing is taking the next number in the line. We're just pulling those items over. And then we're going to take the allocated, we're going to have the amount that we're going to be allocating, and we're going to be allocating this item down here, this 57,000. This was the joint production costs are allocated to the division based on the total sales. So it's based on total sales. We're using the percentage of sales to help us allocate these costs. The joint costs were 57,000. So we're going to take that 57,000 and multiply it times these percentage because we're using the sales percentage compared to the total, segments compared to the total, to help us allocate out that 57,000. So I'm going to make it a negative again. So instead of saying equals, I'm going to say negative of this number. And then I want to make that number stay the same as I copy it across. So I'm going to make that an absolute reference by saying F4 on the keyboard or putting a $ before the C and the 18. Then say times, and we'll be picking up then the percent, which is going to be the 3855 in this case. The 3855 will then change as I copy the cell over. This number will not. It needs to stay stagnant. Therefore, it's an absolute reference given or represented by the $signs. So now let's copy that across. Control C, holding down Shift, going over 3 cells. Control V. Oh, that was C again. Control C, Shift, Control V. There we have it. And then if I double check these cells, it's that 57,000 times this number. That looks right. And this one is the 57,000 times this number. That looks right. That's what we wanted it to do. So now we can sum it up this way, equals the sum here. So there's that, and the sum here is that, and then this item, the traceable costs, is going to be the other side. It's going to be included. This 127 is going to be part of the traceable costs now. So we need to remove 127 of it. That's going to be the other side of this. So I'm going to say a negative of that number, the 127. And then we could sum this up. That's going to be our adjustment. And sum this up. Just those 2 numbers. So there we have those items. And then that's going to give us the total operating costs. So total operating costs will be here. We're just going to sum up the costs. These 2 rows equals the sum of those 2 items. I'm just going to copy it. Control C. And then holding down Shift, right arrow all the way across. And then I'm going to say Control V, and that'll just sum up, as we can see, all the way across. Remember that this number here, we could have summed this way. We could have summed this way for the 820. And this number here, we could also have summed this way to get to the 693,000 as well. Okay, so then we're going to get to the segment profit or loss. So segment profit or loss is going to be equal to the total revenue plus, which is going to be a negative of the total operating costs. And then we can copy that across. So we're going to copy that across, Control C, and then I'm holding down Shift and I'm going all the way across, and then Control V, and there we have that. We might want to put an underline maybe on this whole row. Maybe an underline should go there. I'm just going to select the whole thing. It should be there on your worksheet already. Home, font, underline. Let's do that. So there we have an underline for it, and so that looks good. Okay, and then, and once again, notice you could copy it this way is what I was thinking of. You can, if I was to add them up in this format, I should get to that same 324,000 here. And then if I was to add these up this way, obviously, you get to the same 324,000. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next item, which is going to be other items. And we have the general operating expenses. So this is the general operating expenses. Now these are going to be the items down here for the corporate center. So we have our segments, A, B, C, and D, and the corporate center is not a segment, but we have these costs allocated to it specifically, the 34,000. And that's going to be going there to the corporate center. Let's make it a negative. Negative 34,000, because that's what we've been doing with our costs. We want to be consistent on that. And then if we sum this up over here in the combined total, we're going to get that same number. And if I sum them up over here like we've been doing, we get that same number there. All right. Now we're going to say we have the income from continuing operations. Income from continuing operations. I'm just going to pull these same numbers down. The only change is that 34,000 that's going to have an effect on the combined total. So I'm going to say the sum of these items. I'm going to copy that, Control C, right arrow, holding down Shift, right, and then Control V, pasting it there, pulling down these numbers, same thing. We now have the 34,000, that's the new thing, and that gives us our 290 here. If I was to add these up, they would add up to 290,000 this way, and of course these two add up to the 290,000 this way as well. So now we want to consider the assets. So I'm going to pick up the assets, and we're going to have the segment assets for the segment. And I'm going to pull this from our data over here. This is going to be equal to the 531,000. I'm going to say Control C, holding down Shift. Going to go over to D, Control V, and then we pasted that out. So we got these numbers now pulled over here nicely. We're going to then sum that up, equals the sum of, I'm holding down Shift and selecting those items. So there we have that, the 1,253,000. We're going to say it's going to be the same. Actually, I put that on the wrong cell. Hold on. That should be in the combined area, equals the sum of these items. Okay, and then the consolidated is the sum of these. Then we have the general and corporate expenses, which we said are going to be this 134,000, which is once again going to go to the corporate admin rather than a segment. And so we're going to pick that up, and we'll sum this up then this way, and then we can add up our total assets this way as well. Well, we summed it up this way. Let's sum it up over here, and now we can sum up our total assets, which are just going to be these two cells all the way across. So equals the sum of these two. Control C, right arrow, holding down Shift, going to go all the way across, and then Control V to paste it. And so here's our final numbers for the total assets. So these are going to be some of the information we'll need to help us break out basically the segment reporting. that we may need. Okay, so then we're going to say, okay, what are the reportable segments that we're going to need? We have these 4 segments which are reportable. We got our 3 10% tests, you'll recall, the revenue tests, the segment profit tests, and the segment asset tests. So first is going to be the revenue tests, and these are these 10% tests that we have. So you can imagine then we're going to be testing the top line total revenues to see if they're over the 10%, these segments. And then we're going to be testing basically the bottom line of the income statement, which is, net income, segment profit and loss. And then we will be testing the balance sheet basically in terms of the assets. So that allocation over 10%. So those are 3 10% rules. Now we already did this one. We got the percentages up top. So I could then just pull the percentages. I'm going to just say, all right, well, these are the percentages. And I'm just going to paste that across. This one then is the one that's below 10%. Another way you can look at it is you can say, okay, what's the threshold? So revenue over this amount, this needs reporting, or something like that. And you could say, okay, I know that, the total amount is going to be for the revenue. This 1,144,000. Notice we're taking that before we take out this 127 inter-segment sale, and then I'm going to be multiplying that times the 10% rule, which is going to be that. So that would be then anytime the revenue is over that 114,400. So that, of course, would be these 3 that we would have to report. This one is under, so that would be the exception here. Now, we only need one of the 3 rules. Obviously, if they meet one of the 10% rules, they're more likely to meet the other. So if their revenue is under 10% of the total, you would expect possibly their net income could quite well be as well. It might not necessarily, but quite possibly. So they only have to meet one test, but they could meet, multiple tests. So the next one we're going to take the bottom line number. Now the tricky thing with the bottom line number, the net income or the segment income, is these numbers. Is this one's a loss. So that's a little bit tricky, because what we're basically going to do is we're going to pull out kind of the loss here. So we're going to. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this. What we would typically do is be taking the segment profit and loss and then be dividing it by the combined amount. However, we have this loss, which we're basically going to reverse out. So in essence, we're going to have this divided by the total, which is going to be this 343.36. Or another way you can calculate it is here's everything including that 19,000 that decreased it, and then we're going to basically subtract that back out, or add it back in, however you want to think about it, 343.36, and that's going to be the 343.36. So let's do that a couple different ways. We're going to say, all right, it's going to be this number divided by, I'm going to put brackets around the total, which is this 324, but then I'm going to say minus and back out this 1936, which will basically be adding the 1936 back in to the denominator. And then when I copy this across, these 2 that are in the brackets, I don't want them to move. I want this one to move. So these 2 in the brackets, I'm going to make absolute references by putting my cursor in the middle of them, F4, putting a $sign before the M and the 12. Same thing here, F4, putting a $sign before the K and the 12. So there we have that. Other way you could do it is you can calculate it this way. You can say it equals this number divided by the sum. I'm going to say sum of these three. And then once again, if you were to do that, you'd want to absolute reference this one, F4, and this one, so you can copy it across in the sum, within the sum function. And so there we have that. I'm going to go ahead and make that a percentage, or let's do this. Let's do this and format it on down like that. So there's the 2 ways you can calculate it. Now, if I was to copy this across, I'm just going to, let's hold Control C, and then I'm going to paste this like that. Okay, so there we have it. Now this one, if I was to highlight it, this one moved, and then the two within the bracket stayed the same. That's what you would expect. This one moved, and then the two within the bracket stayed the same. Same thing down here. You see the blue one moved, and then the sum stays the same, and the blue one right? So that looks good. Okay, so then, or we can think about this as the total and see what the net loss has to be over, basically. So we're gonna say, all right, let's do this. We can say this equals and I could do this a couple different ways again. We could be picking up the 324,000 and then adding back with minus this 1936. I'm gonna put brackets around it. Oh, hold on a second. Put brackets around this. I know it's messed up. I know. We're going to put brackets around this and then multiply it times 10%. So that's going to give us the 34,304. The other way you can do that similarly to what we saw before is to say equals the sum of these three items, not including the loss, brackets, and multiply that times the 10%, the 0.1. So that gives you the 34,304 as well. Okay, and then we have the acid test as well. So let's be taking a look at the acid test. Same 10% kind of threshold that we'll be using here. So we have the assets down here, and that's going to give us these items compared to the total. So we're looking at for the segments here, for the segments. So we're just going to be saying this will be equal to the 531,000 divided by the total, which is the 1,253,000. Now this 1,253,000, we don't want that one to move. We do want this one to move. So for the second one, we're going to make that an absolute reference by saying F4, or in other words, putting a $sign before the M and the 17. Then I'm going to say Control C, copying it, pasting it across, and see if it does what we would expect it to do in formula terms. This one moved over, that one stayed the same, looks good. This one moved over, that one stayed the same, that looks good. So that does what we would expect there. We can also think of this in terms of what they would have to be over. And so the threshold that it would have to be over to be able to need to report them is going to be equal to, and we'll just pick up the total for all the segments times 0.1. And that'll give us anyone that's over, any segment that's over the 125,300 then of these. So that would be these three segments would be over, this one would not. Okay, so then we can do another basically analysis, and that's going to be, let's put that down here. So sales greater than this number to a single customer. So if we had a single customer with sales greater than this threshold amount, we'd have to note that as well. So what's going to be that threshold? That's going to be another 10% rule, and that's going to be equal to, and we're going to be picking up the 1,017,000, the 1,017,000, and multiplying that times the 10%. 10%. That's going to be the 1,017. And it might be more proper to take it. Well, anyways, you could take the 1,017,000 here, or the 1,017,000 from the outer column as well. But that's going to be our threshold for the individual customers. Remember, the individual customer could be one customer, or like a federal government, state government, local government, or something like that. Why do we need to note that? Because it increases the amount of risk if a lot of the revenue is coming from a single source.